Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for Osman Serhat Karaman for this invitation. And today I'm going to talk you about web archiving as a step for web-based digital art preservation. It's not going to be a technical presentation. It's about more understanding web archiving, and we would like to discuss more what kind of problems in common with digital art preservation and web archiving. As Osman Serhat Karaman presented, I'm a research engineer at INA, National Institute of Audiovisual in France. I have been working on web archiving since more than 10 years. I've worked in several national projects in France, but also in international projects. And let's start. As you know, web became a mirror of the population that uses it. Today, we share everything, every information on the web, our ideas, our pictures, etc. But web is ephemeral. So it has been a long time that we realized that, and there is a need to preserve for future generations. But we shouldn't think that the web archives is equal to web. It's not at all. First of all, web archives are cumulative. It's not like the web, because in the web, there is only one index. And for web archives, for the same web pages, we have several different versions. And the second, when you search something on the web, you look for the freshness. You would like to get the latest update. You would like to get the latest information. But on the web archives, what you are looking for is more coherence and the preservation. So let's start about a brief history of web archiving. In 1996, Internet Archive, as a non-profit company in San Francisco in US, started to archive web. And at the same time in Europe, Royal Library of Sweden and Nordic Web Archives started the projects. And in Australia, at the same time, Pandora, Preserving and Accessing Networking Documentary, is launched. So all these different projects in different continents, after a while, they would like to share more information, to develop open source applications for web archiving, etc. It's ended up by the International Internet Preservation Consortium. And in 2003, with 12 participating institutions. And today, all over the world, 42 initiatives across 26 countries. They are all doing web archiving. But unfortunately, the Turkey is not in green and it's not in the list. But I hope soon it will be. And let's talk about the different steps of web archiving. First one is the selection and creation, and then crawling, and then storage, access, and preservation. Storage and preservation sometimes bring together in different presentations, but for me, and it's totally different, and they have different challenges for these two steps. Selection and creation, why we need it? Why we don't get all the web? Because we cannot. We cannot freeze the web, and we cannot tell people, hey, stop publishing things because we are archiving, so don't change anything at all for 4 days. It's not possible. So there are different types of archiving. First of all is a bulk archiving, which tries to archive everything, like Internet Archive tries to do. It's a broad but a shallow collection. For example, if you have an URL from Turkey, from a website, you are going to see that it's not archived daily. It's even archived maybe once a month. And there's a domain archiving. Most of national libraries trying to do that by using the top level domain, for example, .fr in France for France. And it gives, it's not that broad, but it still remains the shallow collections because the web is huge, even in the country level. And there are other questions like, it's just what are the French websites? It's just .fr or all the content in French? And other questions. And there are also thematic archiving. This archive aims to get the content related to a topic. For example, French literature or elections in the United States or Paris attacks, etc. For this, we need to create a seed list. Seed lists are the list of the domains or websites or web pages or social media account, hashtags. I mean, everything you would like to archive, everything related to a topic if you are doing a thematic archiving. It's going to be the input of a crawler, of a robot. It's not important to decide the borders. It's not only important to decide the borders of the web archives, but it's also decided because the creators, the people at the libraries who choose who creates these seed URLs, they also give another metadata. For example, priority, collect frequency. If we should archive these websites every day or every hour or just once a month. And crawling type, I'm going to give more details because there are different crawlers for different web resources. Web is not a broadcast media. It's not like watching TV or it's not like listening radio. It's changing, and web responds to interactions, to our interactions. We should interact with the web to get the information. And for crawling purposes, those interactions have to be discovered and reacted in order to be archived, just clicking a link to a hyperlink, for example. And unfortunately, some interactions cannot be crawled and some parameters cannot be controlled. Thus, we can have missing or altered contents in the web archives. Another thing, websites grow and change in heterogeneous ways. So crawlers should revisit the same URL to discover content changes and to download, to archive the new content. But for example, if we archive a web page now, and then if we archive it in 1 hour later, and we have 2 versions, but we have no idea what happened between 1 hour. Maybe we have 10 versions, maybe we just have 2. We have no idea. So that's why we call it sampling, because we cannot get all the updates, all the versions. And also, links page are crawled at a different date time from the original page. This is important because this is a specific issue for web archiving. For example, to crawl a website like CNN.com, you should have days and days. So when you crawl the first page and when you crawl the last page on the sitemap, they have been never existed on the same time on the web. But in your archive, it's like they are existed at the same time. You know, so it's called temporal incoherence. It's a small plan of how we archive at INA, but it's more or less the same thing for the other web crawlers like Heritrix and like HTTP track, etc. We have a seed list, and then we are going to launch a crawler for each website or each web resources. It shouldn't be a website, it can be a web page or something else. And then we collect. And then we update, analyze, index, and we store. But what is this update rate here and why we go back here? I will explain. For example, this is just one page, one simple web page, and there have been 400 resources inside. So when you archive this page, you should archive the page, and then you should archive the 400 resources also. It can be the images, it can come from another website, from another link, it can be the embedded YouTube videos, it can be everything, another object on the web. So what happened, in fact, in each site crawler is that you get an URL from seed list, and you visit it, you select the page, and you download, you parse it, and then you identify resources like URLs, CSS, images, and you also identify the linked page URLs, and then you send it to the seed list. Okay, and then you download the page and you store and you archive. So to be able to archive completely a web page, every object found in a web page, web object should be archived. That's why different methods for different web resources. For example, to archive a website, you can use a classic web crawler, but it's not the same thing for social media. You can archive the social media web pages, but most of the time, social media, they provide the APIs, application programming interfaces. And these interfaces give you more metadata that you can see from the page, and they also want you not to archive their pages, but use their APIs so that they can control the access and etc. And we also at ENI, we use a special crawler that we call live archiving proxy. And we can tell it like a human harvest. There is someone, most of the time creator from our company, and she or he just visits a website and then just follow links. And every interaction that he or she does is archived. Thanks to live archiving proxy. We use it for some time to time for one-shot bot or fast prototyping, because sometimes we just need to archive a website only once or only a small part of it that with the interactions. So we use this one. What is a storage? When we tell about the storage here, we don't tell about downloading and archiving all the web pages and putting them into a USB stick. What we talk about it here to retaining archived web objects on a storage medium securely and reliably. For this, we need a file format. There are two different file formats. One of them is the WARC, Web Archive, a file format for the long-term preservation of digital data. It's a protocol-based one. You do a you do HTTP request, for example, you get a response and then you write it in a file. It's a ISO standard and it's widely used. Lots of national libraries doing web archiving using WARC as a file format. And we have also DAF, Digital Archive file format, but we are using at ENA. It's not protocol agnostic. It's built-in full deduplication. It's extensible. It's not a standard. And we are not very sure if it's a good thing, in fact, because it's more, we can change it any time that we would like to, etc. And here's a small example of WARC record. In the WARC format, there are containers. In each container, there are WARC records, okay, for each object. And here you see a web page. Here is the metadata of WARC. Here is the hash, SHA of the web object content. Here is the headers. These are the HTTP headers. And then you have the content, original file content. For the DAF, it's a little bit different because there is a DAF data records in one container and there is metadata records. And they are recording separately. It helps us to deduplicate the data not as a post-processing procedure, but during the writing to archive. For example, you archive this image, you have a hash value, and then when you revisit or you get the same thing from another website, the same URL, we are just checking from data records by using a Boolean filter or something like this. Just ask, do I have it in my archive? Yes or no? We don't care how we get it, where we get it. So if we have it, we just create a small metadata without getting the data again. When we come to access, in fact, what is more important here to understand the profiles of a web archive users. Web archive users are not the classical web users. I like these two images because one of them is showing the people reading newspapers. Are they the same people who are going to the libraries and doing the research? Most of the time, no. So it's the same thing. Web users are not the same users as the web archive users. They don't have the same needs, same intentions, etc. But when we talk about access to web archives, are we really talking about access? Isn't it more simulation? Because we recreate an object that we archived from web and its interactions from sparse pieces. So what about correctness? What about integrity? What about authenticity? It is the same object? It is the authentic? These are the questions. One of the most known methods in web archiving, access to web archives, is Wayback Machine, introduced by Internet Archive. You need to know the complete URL of your web page or your web source that you would like to, and then you are going to get a kind of timeline, and you can choose the date you would like to, and you will get the page as it was on the web for a given date. And another method is a full text index, full text search. It's like a search engine style search. You have keywords and maybe a time interval, and you have a textual query. This works well, really well for web, because web in their indexes, search engines have only one version of the same page. But on the web archives, we have several versions of the same page. So if you use a non-ranking methods in computer science, you are going to get, for example, for this keyword, you are going to get the same result. I mean, it's not the same result. It's the same page archived several times, but it's the same result for the keyword and 200 times. So it's like opening Google and seeing the same things for 100 of pages, seeing the same results. So most of the initiative archive institutions prefer to just collapse everything together. For example, this is the first result. It is the more high rank, but you can see another other versions of the same web page by interaction. But as we said, web archive users are not the web users, so they need to analyze the data for research purposes. Most of the time, web archive users are historians and researchers. So there is an interesting project, Archives Unleashed Cloud. What they propose is like this kind of network analysis, and they also propose a kind of interface. Yes, you need a little bit to code to get things done and to do the analysis, but it's really good one. You can create a word clouds, or you can analyze this. You can create your time series by your depending on your query, etc. Another thing we did it at the INA. It's to develop specific access applications, which means that this one is for social media, because in social media we have hashtags, we have mentions. For Twitter we have retweets. By this interface, user can search. They can do a full text search. I mean, like a search engine. They can see the timelines. They have different facets on relevant fields. I mean, they can, for example, here you can see the images, top used images. They can do some analytics and some statistics with the data. It's challenging to build because even the social media data, they are not normalized. They have different metadata that we get with the APIs. But on the other side, we have really good feedback from users, most of the time who are the researchers, because this tool lets them not just to see a tweet post archive, a tweet archived a given time, but also do some statistic and data analysis. And here is another example that we developed at INA, because we have also the television archives, as we are the National Institute of Audiovisual. Here is from our TV archives, and what happens on the social media on the same time. So what we archived for the television and what we archived for the Twitter at the same hour. So it's interesting to study the reactions of people to the events, for example. When we come to preservation, in fact, access, crawling, indexing, these are the issues, challenges, steps well studied in computer science, especially in computer science with the search engine success, in fact. But on the other hand, preservation is really specific to web archiving. So there's a big challenge related to due to technology obsolescence. It means heterogeneous and evolving source formats, as well as evolving targets formats. What it means? It means that what you archive changes, what you archive, the format of the object you archive change. But on the same time, if you decided to keep them in a specific format, it can change also by time, because the technology is changing every moment. So on the other hand, another issue is that we have very big, large archives. It's really huge. But on the other hand, the access, the users that we have, 10, maybe 15, So low access ratio we have here. There are two different approaches for the technology obsolescence. One of them is emulation. what we do here, we develop a new software, which is called Emulator, to mimic the functionalities of the obsolete technology. It works, okay. But for everything in your archive, because now the archive history is more than 20 years, if you should have a simulator for Windows 95, Windows 2000, each version of Explorer, I don't know. And then another thing is migration. You are transferring data to the newer system formats. For example, I don't know, you archived everything on JPEG and it's not going to be used in, I don't know, X years. And you can convert all of them to PNG, for example. But it's too expensive. It's taking time and it's too expensive. And what we are doing as a strategy at INA, what we do is, first of all, keeping the original formats without attempting any normalization, including the broken, invalid contents, and unsecured contents, etc. Why? Because it was like this on the web when we try to archive it. So we are archivists, like the not digital ones. I mean, it was the state of the object, so we get it like this. So we keep it like this. We don't touch it. And what we do then is trying to attempt to select the proper format, canonical and optimal, when a choice is available. For example, when we use YouTube APIs, YouTube asks us, we can say to YouTube, give me this format, this hot definition, this one, this one, this one. We cannot get all of them. It's going to take a huge place. So we decided to keep only the MP4 as a format. And what we do, we are doing the conversion on the fly, conversion of the obsolete contents. What does it mean? For example, you came to access to our web archive, you are visiting a web page. In a web page, there was a video in the FLV format, okay, another old format of video. What we do, when you visit this page, on the fly, we convert it to MP cards for MP4, and we display it to you like this, okay? And what happens, there are obsolete formats, but they are very, very obsolete formats. I mean, you cannot even do the conversation on the fly because you need a migration, because you need really a specific operating system. So what you do, you get a server, you install this version of a specific thing, and you do the migration because you don't have any choice, because you cannot do it on the fly. And another interesting point is what's happening with the modern browser, because with the modern browser, we are more aware of privacy, we are more aware of security. So their practices, best practices rules start to breaking in fact backward compatibility. It means that you cannot, for example, before we were able to do some Ajax cross-domain, we could use it on the websites. Now we cannot. But what to do with the web pages, websites already archived with these tricks? I mean, it's the same thing for HTTPS. Before, in the HTTPS files, you can keep the links to HTTP, but now you cannot. So how to play these websites in the new browsers to give an access to the users? And one solution is emulation. The other solution is, why not to develop period-specific browsing tools? For example, everybody is talking about now Flash is going to die in the end of this year. Rest in peace, Flash. But what to do for the web pages that we archive using Flash? To sum up all together, we have web, we would like to archive it. We create a seed list about the topic or domain level or what we archive. And then we get them, we index them, we give access, we do the storage. This is also important that there is two types of storage. Storage for access, I mean, for the users who use this, and the storage for the preservation, because you not give the same server and the same data to the end user. It looks good. I mean, everything is okay. La vie est en rose. Not at all, unfortunately, because we have so many challenges. What we should know and be aware that all web archives are incomplete. I mean, you cannot archive all, even for a subject. It's so dependent on the seed list. It's so dependent on the technology. It's so dependent on the crawler parameters. And it's incomplete, but one of the researchers, historian Niels Brugger, he said that there are also two complete web archives. What does it mean? Okay, they are incomplete from one side because we don't have all the versions of all the web pages, but they are two complete because we have several versions for one page. So we can study evolution of a web page or website. Here we come again to the importance of seed lists, in fact, because imagine two institutions in the same country even, they would like to archive, for example, Paris attacks. Okay, they would like to create an archive, a topical archive about Paris attacks. If they have different seed lists, they will end up with totally two different archives. Even if they have the same seed lists, but they are using the different crawlers, even the same crawler but with different parameters, they also end up with the two different web archives about the same topic who started with the same seed list. So not only the archive, we should be careful and keep it, preserve it, but we also should preserve these kind of decisions. Why this web object is in this web archive? Where did it come from? What was the crawler it's archived? What was the parameters at the time, etc. And also the temporal incoherence that I talked to you, that we cannot archive the same time, even in the same website. We should keep users aware of this by giving access. Most of the times you can see Webpack Machine also does this. You are going to see minus or plus or minus time interval. It means that you started to crawl, you started to visit a web page, archived web page, you click an hyperlink, but it's not archived at the same time, but maybe it's archived 1 hour later. So be aware. So in the real world, these two pages never existed at the same time on the web. When it comes to digital artworks versus web archiving, to be honest, it looks more challenging because, first of all, web archiving, most of libraries, national libraries, archives web pages according to the legal deposit, web legal deposit. What it means, it's like legal deposit. I mean, if you publish a book, you should give a copy to your national library. So it's the same thing for the web legal deposit, but we cannot ask everybody when change something to give a copy to the national institutions. So we crawl them. But on the other hand, for the web-based digital artwork, archivists should work with the artists themselves to collect information on artist intentions. What kind of reactions, interactions should we create to get the artist intentions and to archive well the web object, art object. And another problem is quality assurance. How to decide if what we did is good as a web crawler. There are not so many measures to decide, to measure quality assurance. There are several projects for the preservation of digital art, like scientific-based, collaborative, or commercial. And Rhizome, I think everybody knows, they have two projects, Colloq and Conifer, and this one is new, and I think it's related to web recorder, and Ilya will give you more details with the demos, I think. So thank you very much for your attention.